Welcome to Twilight Fables, where forgotten tales resurface, twisted by shadow and salt. Tonight, we begin a story that sinks far below the waves, where beauty and terror sing in the same breath. This is the Drowned Song, a dark retelling of the Little Mermaid. In the trench-riddled deeps, where the sun's touch failed, and even bioluminescent creatures shied away, the bone coral court brooded in silence, built from the rib cages of ancient leviathans and stitched with the tongues of drowned sailors. It was a palace that never glittered, only glowered. It pulsed like a wound in the sea. Here lived the Sea Queen, half woman, half wrack, all hunger. Her crown was a wreath of barnacles and black pearls, and her voice could freeze the current. Around her throne swam her daughters, 6 in all, each more beautiful and blood-hungry than the last. All but the youngest. She had no name. Her mother never gave her one. Names were power, and the Sea Queen did not waste power on disappointments. Where her sisters braided jellyfish into veils and sang songs that shattered eels, the youngest lingered near the bones of wrecked ships. She was drawn to the strange, still corpses that fell from the surface world, clutching bits of iron, books, and flasks of strange-smelling liquid. She called them her silent men. In secret, she collected them, not the bodies. They were devoured quickly by the scavenger worms, but their remnants. Fingers she pickled in cuttlefish ink, teeth she strung into necklaces, hair she stitched into webs, but most precious of all were the souls. With ancient sigils scraped from the hulls of demon-worshipping whalers, she learned to trap a man's essence in globes of whale oil. The flickering lights, to her, were company. They whispered back sometimes. She hid her jars deep in a coral crypt, behind curtains of stinging anemones. Her sisters mocked her. "She listens to glass," sneered Serena, eldest and cruelest, with a laugh like knife edges. "She talks to bones," giggled Nerea, whose tail was lined with poisonous spines. But the Sea Queen said nothing. Not praise, not scorn. The nameless one was beneath acknowledgement until her 16th cycle. On that day, tradition demanded the youngest princess rise to the surface and see the world above. A rite of passage, a reminder that the ocean kept her daughters and would not share. Her sisters had returned from their surfacing with trophies, gilded sabres, a flayed sailor's skin, even a priest's mummified tongue. They came back whispering of stars and fire and towers that scraped the clouds. The nameless one wanted none of those. She only wanted a song she'd heard once, long ago, carried on the waves after a storm. It wasn't sung by the sea. The water thinned as she rose. Strange pressure gripped her, cold and tight, as if the sky itself feared her arrival. Then light, pale silver spread across the surface like spilled milk. The moon, round and unblinking, greeted her as she broke through the black and gasped. It hurt. The air was too dry, the sky too empty. But then she saw it, a ship, not a war barge or a merchant's hulk, but a floating palace made of redwood and silver sails. Lights danced along its deck like fireflies. Music drifted to her, haunting, foreign, alive. And there, a boy. No, a man, but barely. His skin golden, his hair caught in wind and laughter. He held a lute and sang a melody so bittersweet that even the sea hushed to listen. The nameless one felt something break in her. She swam closer. The ship shuddered. Storm clouds massed suddenly, unnaturally. The sea queen watched from below, her tendrils stirring the deep. She disapproved of surface fascination. The wind shrieked, lightning cracked. The ship split with a cry of snapping timbers. The man was flung from the deck. She dove for him through debris and foam. She found his body sinking. Blood trailed from his temple, but he was not yet dead. She cradled him, her tail wrapping around his legs like ivy. For a moment, she imagined herself part of him, two halves of something ancient and whole. Then she sang. It wasn't the song from his lips, but something older, her own lullaby, the one she'd whispered to bottled souls in her grotto. Her voice wrapped around his heart, slowed its beat, and called his spirit to hers. When he stopped breathing, she smiled, but something changed. His soul did not drift, it pulsed, resisting, refusing her pull. A force, unseen but vast, yanked it back. She screamed. The body drifted upward, toward the shore. She could not follow. Back beneath the waves she howled before her mother's throne. I want legs, she croaked. I want to go where he went. The sea queen's eyes glowed like twin volcanoes. You want to give up the sea for the poison of men? I want him. The sea queen laughed. Then seek the one who crawls in the trenches. She barters in curses. Then she turned away. So the nameless one swam for 7 days and 7 tides, deeper than breath could survive, deeper than light dared touch, past whale carcasses twisted into temples, past titan jaws fossilized mid-roar. She found it, the trench. It gaped like the mouth of a god. At its lips sat a hut, lashed together with chains, skulls, and knotted hair. Within waited the witch beneath the trenches. She had no body, just drifting bones held together by octopus strands and bitter magic. Her voice echoed from everywhere at once. You want legs, little splinter? Yes, legs come with pain, with blood, with walking alone. I don't care. You will, and what will you give me in return? My voice. The witch laughed, dry as sand. Too easy. Give me your name too. I have none. You do now. I'll take it. A silver eel slithered from the darkness and sliced her throat open with its fin. Not deeply, but enough. Her song bled out in bubbles. The witch collected them in a flask and drank. Then the pain began. The nameless one's tail peeled apart like old bark. Nerves flared, bones split, her body shrank, shriveled, shifted. When she awoke, gasping, coughing sand, she lay naked on a shore of black stone beneath a ruined cliff, 2 legs bleeding, raw, and the prince's castle beyond, its windows aglow, its music haunting. She stood. Each step was agony, but she smiled, for above her the prince's voice once again danced in the wind, and it was the same song she'd heard beneath the waves, only now it no longer belonged to her. The sun had no warmth for her. It glared down as if in judgment, catching the red smear of blood trailing from her heel to the tide line. Each step along the black shore felt like walking on broken shells, her newly split legs raw and shuddering. The nameless one did not cry. She couldn't, not just from pain. The witch had taken her tears along with her voice. That too had been part of the deal. She remembered the witch's final words, rasping from beneath the tangle of bones and barnacles. Walk softly, the land listens. The prince's castle loomed above her on the cliff, not like a beacon of safety, but like a watchtower keeping something in. It was a fortress hewn from sea stone and polished coral, the sort of place built by people who had fought the sea once and feared it would return. She waited beneath the cliffs until the tide withdrew again, dragging her trail of blood with it. Then she climbed. It took hours. Her fingers tore, her legs screamed, her vision dimmed, but when she reached the top, the last light of day caught in her salt-stiffened hair, making her appear like something caught between tide and twilight. The prince was walking the cliff edge alone. He saw her and froze. She had no words, no name, no story, only the agony of her body and the glimmer of his face in her memory, drifting just beyond reach. He rushed to her, panic and wonder twisting across his features. He called for help. She did not hear the words, only the music beneath them, the same tone she remembered from the drowning night. That voice had pulled her from the deep. Now it was before her, shivering with life. She collapsed into his arms, smiling through the blood on her lips. And that was how she entered his world, not as a woman or a witch or a creature of the trench, but as something broken and mute that he would try to fix. He gave her a chamber near the top of the castle, where the windows opened toward the sea, and the wind never stopped whispering. He brought her food she could not stomach, and clothes she could not wear without pain. He gave her a name, Maris, which she accepted with a nod, though it felt wrong in her bones. She was not this Maris. She was not his invention, but she smiled. He thought her grateful. The palace staff watched her closely. Servants whispered behind doorways. The old priest who tended the castle shrine clutched his talismans tighter when she passed. "She smells like sea rot," one muttered. "She walks like her bones are glass," said another. "She has no shadow," only the prince defended her. "She was shipwrecked," he insisted. a poor girl from the other coast. Her ship was caught in the storm, the same one that nearly took me. He never questioned why she could not speak. He simply filled the silence with his own stories of battles on the water and dreams of uniting the coastal kingdoms. He told her she was safe here. She tried to believe him, but the walls did not sleep. At night, the castle groaned. It was not the usual settling of stone or wind through high towers. It was a groan of memory, as if the structure itself resented still standing. The sea crashed harder here than anywhere she had ever heard. Sometimes the waves spoke back. She pressed her ear to the floorboards and heard weeping. Once she saw a woman in the mirror who was not her reflection. The woman's mouth was open wide, soundless, her eyes weeping blood. Seaweed clung to her throat like a noose, and when the nameless one turned, she was alone. The prince came to her with gifts. He had a jeweler make her a necklace of sea glass. He composed a lullaby for her, one that sounded eerily like her own voice had when she lived beneath the waves. She wondered, had he taken her voice, not through cruelty, but through some unknowable tether? Did her song live in him now? She began to suspect the witch hadn't merely taken her voice, she had transferred it, and he was singing her soul back to her, piece by piece. One evening, while wandering the lower halls, she found a locked door half buried behind tapestries. It was ringed with rust. The handle burned cold. The tapestry had been torn, revealing a crest beneath, a black serpent swallowing the sea. She touched the wood, and something shuddered behind it. Not just movement, recognition. She left quickly. That night, the dreams came again. She was drowning, but it was not water that filled her lungs. It was music. A chorus of women sang from the deep, their voices hollow and angry. They floated beneath her, skin pale, eyes open and dead. They had tails like hers once, but now they were torn and fused with rot. Their lips moved with words she could not hear, but somehow knew. She had joined their number. She was becoming them. When she awoke, the sheets were soaked with salt water. The prince began to change. He grew distracted. His lute gathered dust. He stared long into the sea, with eyes full of something like dread. A foreign princess was arriving soon, he said. A political arrangement, one he could not refuse. But she isn't like you, he told her gently, brushing her sea-roughened cheek. You're something else, like a dream I haven't finished yet. She tried to smile, but beneath her silence, rage curdled. The prince had not fallen in love with her. He had fallen in love with her mystery, her muteness, her sadness. He saw a mirror, not a person, and behind the mirror, something else stirred. She returned to the door behind the tapestry. This time it opened. The stairwell beyond descended deep into the earth, beneath the castle's foundations. Moss coated the walls. Strange runes lined the ceiling. Glyphs she had once seen etched into sunken tombs. near the witch's trench. At the bottom, she found a shrine. It was not to the gods of land or sky. It was a shrine to the sea. Dozens of portraits lined the chamber. Women, each bore a resemblance to her. Long hair, hollow eyes. Some had tails drawn beneath them in fading paint. One bore her exact face. Below it, a plaque read, "To Thyra, Bride of Salt." She stumbled back. The candles flickered. Behind her, someone breathed. She turned, and the priest stood in the doorway. He looked at her, not with surprise, but with pity. "You've come far," he said softly, "just like the others." She tried to speak, tried to scream, but no sound came. "I warned him," the priest whispered. "I told him the sea wouldn't let him go, that his line was cursed. Every generation, one of you comes." He touched the portrait. She gave up her name too. She ran. The wind howled in her ears, and the walls shrieked with voices she couldn't silence. Her legs buckled, her bones cracked. Her time was running out. Back in her room, she crawled to the window. Below, the sea waited, and within it, a shape moved, a massive, slumbering form, deep in the water, glowing faintly with eyes older than the moon. It opened one, and she felt it see her, not the prince, not the castle, her, the thing in the deep that the shrine had been built for, the true bride of the sea, and it wanted her back. The castle woke to screams. Servants whispered of sea salt crusted across the upper corridor floors, of fish bones found under pillows, of a shadow shaped like a woman lingering in the hall near the chapel. They did not speak these things to the prince. He was already growing pale again, haunted. He no longer touched his lute. The nameless one sat in silence. She had stopped pretending to eat. The food rotted in front of her, souring the air. Her skin had grown translucent at her extremities, like jellyfish, bell flesh in moonlight. Bruises bloomed across her legs, too deep to be from a fall. They radiated out like veins filled with ink. Still, the prince visited her chamber daily. Still, he smiled. Still, he asked no questions. He sang to her only once more, a gentle tune, familiar. Her voice, her stolen voice, danced through his lips like a ghost wearing skin. She trembled. He noticed. He smiled wider. Days blurred. Nights bled. The other princess arrived. She was lovely, tall, composed. She wore white and silver and moved with the precision of someone who had been raised to be worshipped and used to it. Her eyes scanned the castle as though calculating its value. When she met the nameless one, she offered a polite nod, but her gaze lingered long, too long, and beneath it, the nameless one felt her very bones ache. Later, she found the visiting princess in the chapel. The noble woman was touching the stone baptismal basin, whispering in a dialect the nameless one barely remembered from the deep. Not human, Not entirely. The prince did not speak of it. He avoided both women. The castle, however, changed. More salt, more weeping behind the walls. At night, the nameless one wandered the tower. Her feet bled, the stones bit into her soles, but she couldn't sleep, she couldn't dream. She found the locked tower above the west wing, the one sealed with iron and lined with fish spine nails. Inside were paintings, portraits at first, then frescoes, each of a woman with eyes like hers, dozens of them. Some were smiling, most were not. One had her hands pressed to her throat, mouth wide in a scream that never ended. The final painting showed the prince, but not as he was. Younger, smaller, blood on his mouth, sirens kneeling at his feet, their throats open, red rivers across his lap. He was smiling. She tore it from the wall. Behind it, etched into the stone, was a name, Iskarith. She didn't know it, but it coiled inside her like a hook in flesh. She tasted copper, heard waves, felt teeth. Then she fled. The next morning, the prince asked her to accompany him to the beach. He spoke softly now, reverently, like he feared the sea could hear him. "They say I was born there," he told her as they walked, "washed up after a great storm. No one knows who left me or why." She nodded. He picked up a black shell and held it to her ear. "Can you hear it?" She could. It was her own voice, echoing through time. A lullaby from the trench, twisted, slowed, but hers. He smiled. She dropped the shell. That night, the castle celebrated the impending union. A feast was held in the prince's honour. He sat between the foreign princess and the nameless one, never touching either, drinking more than he should. The feast was too loud. The music was wrong. The nameless one's hands shook. She saw shadows ripple across the wine, as though seaweed drifted just beneath the surface. Her plate crawled. Her reflection in the goblet stared back at her with empty sockets. And above it all, the visiting princess watched her, not with cruelty, but recognition. They had both made the same mistake, long ago. She left the table before the dessert, climbed the tower again. This time, she followed the wall behind the painting chamber, discovered a stairwell hidden in the stones. Down it she went, deeper than the dungeon, beyond the foundation, to a vault. Inside, 6 jars. Each contained a pale flicker of light. She recognized them, not memories, souls, her sisters. They had traded themselves to the witch, not to save her, but to warn her, to anchor her, to stop her from becoming what she was becoming. But she had gone too far. She had become the salt bride. The final soul jar was different. Dark, heavy, it pulsed. Not a sister, not even a mermaid. A fragment of her, her original soul, split during the transformation. The witch hadn't taken it all, only half. The rest had remained, buried beneath the castle, fed by whispers, shaped by pain. And it had grown. She touched the jar. It burned her, showed her what she had become and what she would become. A bride, not to a man, not even to the prince, but to the sea itself, to the one whose name was hidden in the stones. To Iskareth. She staggered to the beach. The water called her. Each wave spoke her name, not the name the prince had given her, not Maris, her real name, the one she'd never known, the one that couldn't be said in any language spoken above the waves. She let the tide rise over her feet. It turned red. She collapsed. From the cliff above, the foreign princess watched. The wind caught her veil and tore it into the sky. She turned and whispered into the wind. She is waking. The storm arrived with no warning. No thunder, no wind, only pressure, so sudden and dense. It bent the trees at the cliff's edge and turned the sea into a sheet of trembling steel. In the castle, the foreign princess turned her goblet upside down. Blood, not wine, poured from it. No one else seemed to notice. She smiled softly. "It begins," she whispered. The nameless one awoke in the chapel, draped over the stone altar like an offering. Her blood had painted the prayer etchings, and barnacles were blooming on the floor beneath her. The priest stood in the corner, his eyes sunken, his robes wet. "You've gone too far," he said. She tried to move but couldn't. The air smelled of brine and iron. "You were supposed to become his muse, not his mirror." He lit a candle. The flame burned green. "When he sings," he continued, "he does not share your voice. He devours it, and through it he changes." The prince, in his tower, played again, not for joy, not for love, but because he had to. The music compelled him, an aching, unbearable pressure in his chest that only eased when the melody was released. He didn't know whose song it was anymore, only that he felt it in his marrow. Preparations for the banquet resumed. The storm loomed, but no one dared cancel. The castle cook found squid ink dripping from the ceilings. One maid went blind after touching the silver polish. The wine turned salt black. Still, the prince insisted. The show must go on. The nameless one dressed herself. The gown was grey and brittle, smelling of mildew. It had not been made for her. It had waited for her. In the mirror, she didn't see herself. She saw the others, the brides before. Each blinked, in and out like flashes of lightning. One had her hands sewn shut. One was missing her skin. One had no face. She blinked. They were gone. In the grand hall, the music was shrill and too fast. The prince greeted guests with practiced smiles. The foreign princess sat quietly beside him, lips barely moving as she hummed beneath her breath. The nameless one entered last. Every eye turned. She did not look human anymore, not fully, not enough. Her legs moved like a marionette, pulled by a drunk god. She did not bleed anymore. She oozed. The feast began. Boiled fish, oysters that screamed when opened, wine thick and clotted. The prince ate without tasting. The foreign princess drank without blinking. The nameless one stared at her plate. On it, delicately arranged, were 6 pearlescent fish, each with a tiny crown of sea glass, each with eyes like her sister's. She stood up slowly, and the walls cracked. The chandelier fell. A servant screamed. Salt water burst from the stone floor, flooding the room an inch deep. The storm had entered the castle, not through doors, but through memory. The nameless one turned to the prince. His eyes were no longer his own. They swirled like eddies pulling light downward. "Maris," he said, but not in his own voice. "You found your way back." She shook her head. She was not Maris. She had never been. She reached for the bone knife tucked beneath her gown, the one her sisters had given her, the one carved from her own old tailbone, the witch's final gift. She raised it, but he smiled and sank. Her body froze. The knife fell to the floor, rattling like a broken promise. He walked toward her. "Don't cry," he said. "It's all part of the song." Behind him, the foreign princess rose. She spoke the prince's true name, not the one used in the court, not the one whispered by lovers, but the old name, the deep name, the one etched into the bloodline of cursed kings. Iskareth. The music shattered. The prince screamed, his mouth opening far too wide. Rows of teeth tumbled out, falling into the sea, water pooling around his feet. His body contorted. The transformation began. The nameless one ran, out of the banquet hall, past the dead-eyed servants, up, to the tower again. The sea crashed louder. Lightning struck the chapel spire. The castle moaned like a creature waking. She flung open the tower window and stared at the waves. In them, something moved, something older than the storm. It had no name, only hunger. The foreign princess stood in the ruins of the banquet hall, her veil torn by wind. She stepped into the rising flood and spoke aloud to the thing beneath the waves. She remembers now. She knows what she was made to become. The waves answered. They spoke in the voice of 100 drowned brides. In the tower, the nameless one looked down. Her old soul still pulsed in the jar below, but the ocean no longer wanted it. It wanted all of her. She leapt from the window, but the sea didn't catch her. It claimed her. The sea did not kill her. It took her, bent around her like a second skin, pulled her under, not with violence, but inevitability. There was no struggle, no final breath, just silence. Then the silence broke. The nameless one opened her eyes, but she was not in water, not exactly. She floated in a black space, suspended between dream and drowning. The pressure here was impossible, folded reality. Her body unravelled and reformed with every breathless heartbeat. Limbs flowed into tendrils. Skin hardened, then softened, then disappeared altogether. Around her, brides wept, hundreds, thousands. Some had no faces, some had no skin, some were nothing more than voices caught in whirlpools. She floated among them, and at the centre of it all, It pulsed, a shape too vast to see in full, coiled like a god in slumber, eyes like whirlpools, a voice that didn't speak but remembered. Iskarith. He had always been there, beneath every drowning, beneath every song, beneath the sea queen's silence and the witch's teeth and the bone knife she had failed to use. This was never a story of love. This was a summoning, and she had been its vessel. Her body burned, her tail returned, but not as it had been. It stretched wider, cracked down the middle, feathered with black fins and streaked in phosphorescent rot. Her eyes glowed now, her ribs split, her song returned, not in melody, but in power, and all around her, the brides of the deep turned to face her, not in fear, in reverence. She remembered the soul the witch had taken was only half. The other half had never left. It had sunk into the trench. It had become part of him, and now he wanted her fully merged, bride and god, lover and anchor, singer and scream. But she hesitated. One memory floated up from the depths, weak but stubborn. The prince's face, not twisted by Iskareth, not devouring her voice, not bathed in the storm's cruelty, but human. The brief moment when he had cradled her on the beach, mistaking her for a miracle. Was that enough? Was it real? Did it matter? Above, the castle was breaking. Towers fell into the sea. The priest had hung himself in the chapel with kelp. The foreign princess stood in the collapsing garden, arms wide, her body dissolving into foam. "It is done," she whispered. "We are free." But the prince was not dead. He had fled to the beach, the only place he remembered being saved. He cried out for Maris, for the nameless girl, for the voice in his head that would not stop screaming, and the sea answered. She rose, not from the waves, but through them. She stepped onto the beach, on limbs that shifted between leg and tail, clothed in silt and starlight. The prince fell to his knees. He whispered her name, not Maris, not the one he gave her, but the name she had never told him, the one she had never known, the one Iskareth had hidden in her bones. She froze. He remembered. The other brides emerged behind her, the drowned chorus. They encircled him like mist, but she raised her hand, and they paused. She approached, looked into his eyes, and for the first time he said nothing. No music, no charm, only tears. She placed a hand over his heart, not to crush it, to feel its beat. Then she pressed her forehead to his and sang. The sound split the waves. It shattered the castle ruins. It silenced the sea god. It was not a love song. It was a requiem for what she had been, for what he could have been, for what the sea had always demanded. When she stopped, the prince collapsed, alive but empty. Her voice had left him completely, and now it belonged only to her. She turned away, walked back into the sea. The other brides followed. not with sorrow, with joy. In the depths Iskareth stirred, but he did not take her, not yet. She had sung her own name, she had claimed her own soul. Now she was no longer his vessel, she was his rival. The war had begun, and the sea would never be silent again. The sea was split, not in tide, but in allegiance. For centuries the drowned had obeyed, their lips sewn shut by the will of Iskareth, their sorrow harnessed into silence. Now one had defied him, one had sung, and her song echoed from trench to reef, from shipwreck to surf. The nameless one was no longer his, she was no longer anyone's, and that made her dangerous. Above, the prince woke in a bed of salt and moss, cradled in the belly of a broken lifeboat. He no longer dreamed, no melodies plagued him now, no whispers in his sleep. The voice was gone, but so was his power. The people who remained in the coastal village looked at him with suspicion. He was their prince, yes, but the sea had marked him, and the sea was angry. He had tried to marry the wrong woman, and the sea never forgot betrayal. The wedding had been planned before the storm. Now it returned, a wedding not for unity, but sacrifice. The foreign princess was gone, dissolved into the foam she came from, but another had risen, from the tide, from the trench, from the wound beneath the world. The nameless one, she walked through the ocean like it parted for her. Coral bloomed where she stepped, her hair tangled with jellyfish, her eyes mirrored the sea's rage, and she returned to the castle ruins on the day her marriage was meant to be. No guests arrived, only ghosts. The priest was found nailed to the chapel door, his mouth stuffed with sand dollars, and his eyes sealed with barnacle wax. The banquet hall had grown teeth, rows of them jutting from the walls like limestone fangs. The prince was led into the hall by hands not his own. He did not struggle, he understood. This was not redemption, it was ritual. The nameless one stood at the altar made of driftwood and whalebone. She wore no veil, she wore no crown, only her skin, glowing faintly from within, as if something vast churned just beneath the surface. The prince knelt before her, his eyes were dull, his lips cracked, and still he tried to speak. "I'm sorry." She tilted her head. A ripple passed through her, like a reflection in a pond, struck by a single drop. Then she reached into her own chest and pulled something out. A shard, glass, or bone, or soul. She offered it. He took it. It hissed as it touched his skin. Then it sank into him. He screamed, but it wasn't pain. It was clarity. He remembered all of it. The women, the songs, the deals. His ancestors packed with Iskareth, trading each firstborn's voice in exchange for peace on land. But peace came at a price. Each prince was marked. Each prince was born to summon a bride from the deep, not to marry, but to deliver. A vessel for the god. He had not fallen in love. He had obeyed a curse, and now it was broken, because she had chosen not to kill him, not to complete the pact, but to transform it. The walls trembled, Iskareth screamed, the sea boiled beyond the shattered windows. The god was rising, no longer fed by sacrifice, now only hungry. The nameless one turned from the prince. She walked to the open hall, where the storm clawed at the stone. She opened her mouth and sang, not alone. The drowned sang with her, the other brides, the foreign princess, now remade as wave and will, even her sisters, their souls drifting like petals in the tide. The castle could not hold it. The cliffs cracked, the mountains split, the ocean rose, not in rage, but in awakening. Iskareth emerged, not as a beast, not as a man, but as a shape that bent perception, eyes that opened within eyes, hands that reached into memory. He came for her, but she did not run. She stepped into the sea and waited. He touched her. She split, not in pain, but in becoming. Her soul divided. Her human shape burst into coral. Her voice became current. Her memory bled into the foam, but she endured, and within the god she carved her name into the flesh of a titan, into the heart of the ocean. The prince was found days later, alone on the shore. He wandered inland, barefoot and bloodied, carrying a stone carved with a name no one could read. He built no kingdom, he claimed no throne, but when people sang near the water, the sea listened. And sometimes, if the melody was pure, it sang back. Time moved strangely after the storm. The coast never recovered. Villagers said the tide no longer obeyed the moon. It came and went with its own mind now, flooding farmland one day, vanishing the next. Crops failed. The wind moaned at night like a widow who had forgotten why she wept. Fishermen no longer dared cast their nets, not because of the drowned, but because the sea now sang back, and not all who heard the song returned whole. The prince vanished from public view. He built no monuments, refused all titles. He retreated to a shack, far from the broken castle ruins, high on a bluff, where the sea could not reach him. Still, it whispered to him every night, her song, not pleading, not forgiving, just there, like a scar humming in the bones. He carved her name again and again, into stone and shell and driftwood, but no one else could read it. It did not stay. The sea always reclaimed the letters, because her name was no longer for the land. It belonged to the deep, far beneath, where light had never touched. The bone coral court cracked and bled. The sea queen was dead. Her throne, a cage of jawbones and venom pearls, now sat empty, not abandoned, redesigned. It had become something else entirely. Her youngest daughter had not returned to reclaim it. She had redefined it. Now the throne pulsed with coral and ink, barnacles arranged in strange runes. It listened, it remembered. The sea had a new queen, But she did not rule with teeth or tradition. She ruled with song, and through her the dead remembered what it meant to be seen. She was not whole, not truly. Part of her still drifted within Iskareth's heart, wrapped around the spine of that old hunger, refusing to be consumed. Part of her stood atop the waves, singing to sailors who could not hear her. Part of her waited in the silence between shipwrecks, where barnacles formed the shapes of lost faces and eels wept saltless tears. But the core of her, the core that had remembered her name, that ruled. One day, a child from a distant village wandered too far along the shore. She found a seashell, black, jagged, etched with symbols that burned her fingers. She took it home. At night, she heard humming from inside, a lullaby, sad and slow. It told her of brides and betrayal, of bones made into palaces, of a god who mistook silence for devotion. She hummed it back, and the sea answered. In the years that followed, stories spread of a maiden with eyes like tide pools, and hair braided with the dreams of sailors, of shipwrecks rebuilt from kelp and memory, of monsters who wept when they heard certain melodies, of a queen who would rise once more, not for war, but for reckoning, because the ocean does not forgive, it does not forget, it sings, and now it has a voice again, high above, in the prince's final winter. He stood once more at the cliff's edge, white-haired, silent. He dropped the carved stone into the sea one last time. It sank slowly, spinning as it fell. He whispered her name, and for the first time since she left him, he heard her answer, soft, sad, strong, a song that did not belong to him, but had loved him once. Then he stepped into the wind and vanished. The sea did not claim him, but it remembered. The tide never forgot, though empires rose and vanished inland, though kings warred and burned and crowned and buried along the coast. People still feared the hush that followed the crash of waves. It wasn't mere silence, it was listening. A girl with kelp-green eyes once walked barefoot along the tide line, humming the lullaby she'd learned in her dreams. The sea called toward her with delight, not hunger. It tasted her blood in the air. It remembered the sound. She would be the next, but not yet. The sea queen had not finished her song. Far below, deeper than even the trench that birthed the witch, the waters grew still, and there, in a palace sculpted from the calcified ribs of extinct gods, she sat, no longer the nameless one, no longer a fractured girl clawing for a soul, now whole, not human, not monster, not bride, queen. She wore no crown, it was not needed. Her voice crowned her, her story sharpened it. She did not rule as the sea queen had ruled, with venom and silence, with fear and chains. She ruled by knowing. Every current was her blood, every drowned scream a verse in her hymn. She wove them all into the eternal requiem of the deep. And Iskareth, still there, still immense, still watching, but no longer rising. He slumbered now, lulled by a voice not meant to soothe, but to bind. She did not destroy him, she contained him, as only one who had been offered in sacrifice could, as only one who refused could. Sometimes the drowned whispered that she had once loved, that she had chosen not to consume the prince, because some small, delicate part of her still remembered kindness. Others say she spared him out of pity. Still, others say it was strategy. But those who hear her song in their dreams, those who wake with tears in their eyes and salt crusting their lips, know the truth. It wasn't mercy, it wasn't love, it was sovereignty. Her story spread through shadow and tide. The witch beneath the trenches still told it in broken hymns to eels. The bone coral court echoed it through its hollows, and every year, on the day the storm first split the sky, and the prince first sang her voice aloud, the sea turned blood warm, a warning, a memorial, a promise. A girl once carved her own name into driftwood and placed it into the waves. The sea did not carry it away. It answered, not with words, but with a single ghostly chord in the wind, a note of recognition and something more, permission. She was no longer just a myth. She was no longer just a warning. She was a threshold, a gate, an anthem of pain that refused to be swallowed, a hymn with teeth. The sea did not belong to kings or gods anymore. It belonged to the broken, to the abandoned, to the women who were told they must suffer to be saved. And it had crowned its sovereign from among them. And in the deep, she sang still, not for love, not for war, for herself. And that was enough to keep the sea alive forever.